Okay, so we have a set of data here, and we want to find a mathematical model, which means we want to find an equation which helps us predict how far the marble will roll if we know the time. So the first thing we do is make a quick graph of our data. So we'll highlight our data here, and we'll go to the Insert menu, and we'll insert a chart. You guys are used to this. Under the chart type, we scroll down to Scatter Plot. And here's where it gets interesting. When you look at this graph right here, it looks like it's curving. It doesn't look like a straight line. In fact, if we tried to add a straight line to it, you could see that this straight line here doesn't do a very good job of predicting where the data will be. So we are not going to use a straight line. So all we want to notice is that this graph curves, and it looks like a shape we've seen in math class. It's called a parabola. And so when we graph the data, if it's not a straight line, we've got to do a little bit more work. This is called a non-linear math model. Linear means straight line. This is not a straight line, so it's going to take us a little more work. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this graph. And if we think it looks like a parabola, then parabolas have an equation that looks like this. They look like y equals x squared. So if we think this data is a parabola, what we're going to do is we're going to graph y, which is the distance, and we're going to graph x squared, which is the time, except we're going to square it. Okay? So since we think it's a parabola, that's the kind of math equation we think we're going to have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to copy my data. So I go to Edit, Copy. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to paste it. And then what I want to do is I want to take each of these values, and instead of putting the time, I want the time squared. And you guys probably know, and this is going to be seconds squared. You probably know that in order to square something, you multiply it by itself. So I'm going to delete all these, and I'm going to take 0 times 0, and that's going to be 0. 0.5 times 0.5 is 0.25. So you can grab your calculator and you can figure these out. 1 times 1 is 1. 1.5 times 1.5 is 2.25. And the computer's rounding here. That's okay. 2 squared is 2 times 2 is 4. 2.5 squared is 6.25, so this is going to be 6.25. 3 squared is 9. 3.5 squared, and I'm using my calculator, is 12.25, so 12.25. And lastly, 4 squared is 16. So since I thought it looked like a parabola, I've got y, that's the distance, and I've got x squared, that's the time squared. And now I can graph it and see if that gives me a straight line. So I'm going to go to Insert, Chart. Under Chart Type, I scroll down until I see Scatter Plot, and now you can see a nice straight line on your data. So now we just need to finish things up. Let's go to Titles first. I'm going to go to my horizontal axis title. My horizontal axis title is the time squared. That's x. I squared the time, and that's in seconds squared. And that's what goes on the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, that's the y-axis. I didn't do anything. That's still the distance the marble rolled, and that is in centimeters. My chart title is going to be Relationship between the distance and the time squared for a rolling down a ramp. There we go. That's my title. My subtitle, of course, is always just my name, so you put your name. And then you put the date. This is lab 4.1, and put what period you have this class. I might have a period 1, for example. And now I've got the title and the subtitles and everything. And now I'm going to try to find my mathematical model. So when I click on Series, I go to Trendline. I'm going to make sure it's a linear trend line. And now you can see a straight line does a good job of predicting the data. For the label, I'm going to say use equation. And here I can tell that y, the distance, equals 4.7 times x. So I've got to remember that number, 4.7. Now, what's on my x-axis? It's time squared. So when I go over to use equation and I go to custom, my equation is going to be the distance I go, d, equals 4.7 times x, which is the time squared. So we use a little, it's like a shift 6. Hit shift and then 6 and you can get this little caret thing, this little, looks like a little hat, squared, and that means it's to the second power or times itself. And you can see that went right there. And so what we've done is we've now found the mathematical model. We found the equation that describes our data. So I'm just going to move my graph over here out of the way, and then I can answer questions. If you want to know the distance, you take 4.7 times the time squared. So, for example, how far will the marble roll in 6 seconds? To find this answer, you've got to take 6 seconds and you've got to square it, and then multiply it by 4.7, and that'll tell you how far it rolls. And you can put that answer in there. Okay? So that's how you find a mathematical model when the data does not make a straight line. It's called a nonlinear model.